Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to The What Life. Once again, we're diving into our Zracing monthly race, and this is the third of the series. This one's got a little bit of elevation in it, so it was always going to be a little bit tougher. So let me dial you into some of the numbers that we have going this evening. So it's a bit shorter than our race from last week. We're looking at 14k, which is 8.6 or 8.7 miles. The elevation that I'm talking about is 145 meters for the race, and it is a double lap race. So ultimately, it's a bit of a climb each lap, and that's going to be the thing that breaks the race up. It's going to be things that changes the dynamics. There is also a little bit of a longer lead-in with this race. So I dived in. This is the 5:10 UK time Zwift monthly race on a Monday night. So this is always going to be one of the hotter races for the week. And we had just under 100 people. When I signed up, it was looking like 50, 60. And then I think last minute, a whole bunch of people dived in. We're not quite getting the 150 numbers that we've had from the last few weeks, but we have to remember that we have the Zwift Racing League has also started. I know a few people like to save the legs for a Tuesday night race. And then also, guys, if you're not doing the Zwift Academy, there are the Zwift Academy races that have started this week as well. And I am super keen to get stuck into those as well, because the first Zwift Academy race is a 5-lap tear-up around the Glasgow Crit Circuit, which looks awesome, and I can't wait to dive into that. And that had phenomenal numbers this evening, which was happening at 6 p.m. So that might have been why the numbers were a little bit shy for our 5 p.m. race. But all in all, it was still an absolute hammerfest, just under 100 riders, I think 95, 96 riders, and it certainly didn't disappoint. I'll give you a bit of a breakdown on my numbers for the evening, and I found this one incredibly hard. I think I'm basically coming into week 3 of what might be a 4-week block of training. So I'm getting into the real tricky end of this 4-week periodized block, and last week was super hard, seeing as we did monthly race on a Monday, Zwift racing on a Tuesday, easy day on a Wednesday. Thursday we did the academy training sessions, and if anyone's doing the academy training sessions, the long versions, they're an hour and a half, and they're absolutely tearing me to pieces. They are I find them, obviously, an hour and a half compared to some of these 20, 30 to 40 minute races. It's different gravy, and it is really destroying my body, and I think I was definitely feeling that this evening. But anyway, the stats from this evening: I held 3.7 watts for the race, which comes out at 280 watts for me, which is 3.7 watts, but that's normalized at 297 watts. So if you take in the hills and the efforts on the hills, then I am, bear in mind, basically normalized wattage, I'm almost at my absolute peak for what I'm capable of in terms of normalized watts, which I thought was quite interesting, considering that this was just too much for me. I really struggled, and ultimately, not to give the game away, I get destroyed on the second climb. So that is something to bear in mind. We came in at a blistering time, or certainly the winner of our group came in at 20 minutes 31 seconds, and then I was 44 seconds behind that at 21 minutes 15, which I think from a GC perspective still isn't too bad. And I should imagine, the last few weeks being able to hold on to the group on the flat races, that my GC position shouldn't be too horrible for the month, and that's definitely something I want to keep a bit of an eye on. Anyway, diving into the hard and fast racing that we've got on the screen, you can kind of see that although we went out mildly hard from the start and we got that really long lead-in, the lead-in kind of didn't work out to be too much of an effort. But as soon as we get to this point here, things start just kind of becoming really tricky, shall we say. In terms of power-ups, guys, there are 3 power-ups available. Feather, you have the draft, and then the anvil. I obviously... but I got thrown the anvil 3 times in a row, which for me, considering that I was kind of worried about the climbing and staying with the group, was not really the thing that I was looking at. It just wasn't going to be the power up that was going to help me stay on the group. But what you will see is a little bit later is when I do eventually, or certainly at a couple of the times when it looks like I'm coming off, the power up hat was certainly the thing that saved me, and especially kind of once you made it to the top of the climb, I ended up doing a double power up, which I think was the thing that basically kept me on the back of the group and gave me a second bite at the apple to kind of hit the climb with the front group for lap 2. But all in all, in terms of power-ups, I don't think there was necessarily too much of a strategic decision from a lot of people throwing down their power-ups. It almost seemed like when one person did it, everyone else would do it. Certainly with the draft and certainly with the feather, it almost looked like people were just like panic reacting to other people's power-ups. But you can definitely feel and see that some people would basically take the bit between the teeth and just push the climbs harder. And if you look at my power zones at the bottom of the screen, you can really see how I was having to dig in to try and hold on to these climbs, holding over 400 watts at periods just to try and keep moving. And it was good to see Ollie once again diving in and giving this a crack with me. I've been having let's just put it like a little bit of a success, or feel like I've been having a bit of measured success on the flatter courses. This was my first time riding something that was, I don't really want to call it a climb, it's not exactly that, but it certainly was rolly and burry enough to be considered like not a flat course. And you can really tell the guys who are kind of those hard and fast front of pack Cat B riders. So this is the bit where I'm really starting to struggle. And the one thing I did notice is I really struggled aerobically tonight. My legs were fatigued, and aerobically I couldn't. I was struggling to breathe a bit. My heart rate didn't really get that high, 163 beats. So guys, don't shout at me. I know I'm probably doing too much. I know I probably should have had more time off the bike. But sometimes you need to do it to realize that, and that's a key thing, guys. It's actually, it's when you start ignoring things that you're an idiot. But when you try something and it hasn't quite worked, that doesn't make you an idiot. I'm not necessarily ignoring the signs. I did very little over the weekend in terms of bike training, but so I kind of gave myself a half a chance of recovering for certainly what I knew was going to be a tough Monday, and I know it's going to be a tough Tuesday as we go into Zwift Racing League tomorrow night. Anyway, this was made it to the top of the climb, guys, and then as soon as I got to the top of the climb, I threw my anvil down as soon as we started descending a tiny bit. And these aren't big descents, they're -2-3%. So I made the most of that, and then I realized that I'm still struggling, even though my watts aren't high or we're not moving that fast. So I throw my anvil down again, knowing that hopefully if I can make it through to the start-finish banner, I'm going to pick up another power-up before we do the climb the next time, and hope that I get something a bit more useful than the anvil. But what I did find is, if you are going to do this race, it's the same as you might imagine. People push the pace on the climb. I don't know who you sadists, masochists are, but this is just what happens. I mean, I really love it. I love seeing the guys who take that chance to, I guess, try and get rid of the sprinters. So as soon as the incline increases, the guys that can push the watts on the climb and hold that and keep moving forward, they're trying to get rid of some of the bigger riders, the 90, 100 kg riders, who have, for the last 2 weeks, been the guys that have been kind of, I guess, driving the bus and then putting in the efforts for the sprints at the finish. And this is the nice thing about a course like this. It's a bit of an equalizer. And ultimately, from my perspective, I weigh 76 and a bit, 76.5 kg around that mark. I kind of feel like this kind of race should have suited me. I just ultimately struggled a bit more than I thought. But I knew it off the get-go. This was the interesting thing. I knew this race, as soon as I started it, I was like, this is going to be a struggle. And it is hard because I do, ultimately my main goal is to progress as a rider. My main goal is not to look at it on an individualized basis. So if I look at this race as an individualized race, it is a bit of a failure. It didn't quite go to plan. It feels like a bit of a step backwards. But from the long goal, I definitely still think this is moving forwards. It's great to start testing yourself a little bit more. And that's what I kind of worry about as my fitness improves. Sometimes I worry about diving into races or doing events where it doesn't push you hard enough so that you don't get some of the training effect that you're looking for that's going to make you a better rider. And I hope that makes sense. And obviously, I do have the advantage of being kind of middle of the line when it comes to Cat B. I don't want to, not middle of the line. I'm not trying to compare myself to anyone else, but I do feel like obviously I've got a ton of work to do before I am a kind of high level Cat B rider, which is nice, which means that I can dive into almost any race and I'm on the limit of what I'm capable of. But this race being shorter both in terms of time and distance, it was a bit of a kick in the proverbial nuts that the second climb ends up going how it goes. And you can see that as we dive into this second climb and you look at my power zones at the bottom of the screen, you can see where the last climb is. You can see we're diving into the climb this time and it's equally just as spicy. People going hard. I'm not able to produce the same kind of performance as I went up the first time. I'm trying desperately to get moving. My heart rate is struggling. And this was quite interesting from me because I ended up just getting this like intense stitch, which I think I think ultimately it just felt like my body had a complete meltdown going up this climb and I was struggling to breathe and I don't know, have you had that? Is it a thing? I was really struggling to get enough air into my lungs. I couldn't really open up my chest as much as I wanted to because it was just like painful, that real stitch feeling. It's just a bit of a meltdown, guys. Just like you had all the engine warning lights on at the same time. And that was never a good sign. So I was always going to struggle from that point onwards. So the group moves off. And the sad thing is that we're not that far from the top of effectively what is the top of this climb. I also love the fact that, the variability in these races. You look at the mini-map, there's people kind of spattered everywhere now. The whole race breaks up, which I thought was awesome. It makes it so much more dynamic. It makes it more fun. It gives everyone a little bit of a chance to feel like they have their own little race going on, which I think is what has attracted me to Zwift racing and kind of keeps me coming back. These little micro races that you can get yourself into within the bigger picture of a race just become your little focus. And with these big races that we've been doing for the last 2 weeks where it's dead flat, I haven't really had that sense of that. And it's kind of been a little bit less, I don't want to say less rewarding, but I just this is what I love is, falling off the back of a main group when the front group is now only maybe 20 riders less, and then these little spatterings of individual riders and individual groups that you can then kind of try and put your technique up against. And when I say that, I mean what watts do you have to hold to stay with them, or do you want that group to try and move up to another group, or is it worth coming back to the group behind? These are the little things that I love about Zwift racing. Anyway, this is the point where I'm having a complete meltdown. You can see my watts come completely off. My body is just shutting down. I struggled to breathe. My heart rate wasn't working. Ultimately, I know that this is a dumb thing to say, and this is the point when I know that it is, this is the point when I know I'm my own worst enemy, because ultimately I should now be taking a couple of days off, doing a couple of real zone 2 days where I can let my aerobic system recover. But it is Zwift Racing League tomorrow night and I'm part of a team, so I will give that a good crack. I'm looking forward to it. I'm really amped for tomorrow night's Zwift Racing League because it looks awesome, doing the Glasgow crit circuit. But also I know that's going to be super intense. If anyone's ridden that race, and then obviously Zwift Racing is, I guess, just another kind of gravy when it comes to performance. So I'm really looking forward to that. I know it's going to be super intense. I will give that my all, and I will do my best to recover tomorrow. A couple of leg massages, that kind of thing. But that was part of the reason that I didn't want to try and throw in a sprint towards the end. A, it was kind of pointless, but B, it served no purpose, trying to take my body beyond that. So this evening was a bit of a wet squib, if you will. And if you look at my power chart, it's pretty horrible. That's it for tonight, guys. I will see you next